Hello, everyone, and welcome to the very first episode of my D&D / tabletop podcast, the Corner Seat Tavern. First things first, the visual shown on the screen here was made in Dungeon Alchemist, and I used Dungeon Alchemist's ability to connect with Hero Forge to provide the visual of my little avatar there. So lovely little program to use if you want to make maps or scenery for things such as this. And again, you can connect Hero Forge and get some of your own tabletop models as a part of the map. But without further ado, let's get into the first topic I wanted to speak about that I feel... Oh, Steam's going off. Let me go ahead and... There we go. Shouldn't pop up anymore. Anyway, which is my first topic, which is DMing specifically for artificers or players who want to play artificers. And specifically, this can be a problem when either the campaign's not right for it, or you just don't know how to play or build things around artificers, because artificers are a very unique class, even between all the classes, as you need a lot of DM input to make that class work. I have a few gripes about the class itself, not because it's particularly like bad mechanics or game-wise, but just mechanically, it doesn't do enough, I feel, to be unique, to be like a unique class. To me, especially if your DM isn't putting in extra steps, it just sort of feels like a nerfed wizard, and it can feel very much like that, depending on a few things. So I wanted to first talk about when it comes to artificers, is exactly what they are, or what the class tries to have you do as the class. The main point of the class is an artificer is someone who takes magic and combines magic with often mundane things to create magical things. This being shown in the class as having infusions, which you use normal mundane items to create magical items, or you can just straight up create magical items. Most popular, I believe, depending on the campaign game, is you can just create a bag of holding as an infusion. You can just have a bag of holding, which, for some games, pretty good. Other times, it doesn't really matter, but sort of getting the point across that artificers or artificers, they can be said, I've heard it said either way, but they are when it comes down to it, they are the creators of magical items. They often invent new magical items, or they invent new creations that mimic other functions. Most well-known, within lore, at least from what I know, is creating constructs. Obviously, wizards can create golems and stuff, but making the more robotic things, a lot of times our artificers can do that too. And obviously, the meme, artificers love to make guns where guns shouldn't be. And though I have seen that a little bit, and there are some, a lot of people who share stories like that. My personal opinion, I haven't seen it come up much, but it is, again, something you have to mention when it comes to artificers, because artificers are often equated to tinkerers, which I think partly is the reason why DMing for them, and playing as one even, is especially difficult, because people get it in their heads that the artificer is going to make things and make inventions and make little gadgets and everything. And in reality, artificers mechanically, just with the class itself, without any extra work, don't really do that. Yes, you have your infusions, but oftentimes that's just taking, most of the infusions are just taking mundane things and adding a little magic to make them better. Make an improved weapon, make improved armor, have a returning weapon, repeating shot on a bow, or you never need ammo for a bow or a crossbow or something like that. Infusions do a lot to buff items for yourself. And even when you do use infusions to create a magical item, you just create that item. You don't technically, rules-wise, you just have it. You just get it. You don't need to technically have anything to craft into an infusion. Now, a lot of DMs will say, like, if you want to make a bag of holding, you need to have a bag. You need to use some sort of bag. But technically, if you really want to, if you're just a rules person, you don't need anything. You just make it after a long rest. But the problem with infusions I've seen and I've heard a couple other people complain about, not complain, but kind of, concerned with, is you can learn up to however many infusions, but you can't have that many infusions out. So at the end of a long rest, instead of preparing spells, you have to decide which infusions you want to have active that day. I don't like that. I don't like that because it's sort of just like, what's the point of taking the choices if you're not able to have them all? And I know it's for balance reasons, but it gets to the point where if you, like, for example, if one of your, let's say you're a level 3 artificer, and you have 4 infusion choices, and they're pretty low level choices, but let's say one of them is enhanced armor, one of them is repeating shot, one of them is you decide to create a bag of holding, and the 4th one is you've decided to improve a weapon. I'm using that very specific example because you have that bag of holding. You're never going to want to get rid of that. That will always be something you go, yep, that's the infusion I want to keep active. And at that point, you'll have another infusion you like that you keep all the time, and there's no point in switching them. And then you're not really crafting things all the time. You're just doing the same thing over and over again. There's no reason for you to continue to make things. Now, when you level up and you get more infusions and you can make more infusions and have more active at one time, that you get that little bit of, oh, I'm doing it again and again. But again, you have to level up. And a lot of games don't go very high level. Especially if you're not specifically doing a very high level game. Artificers just sort of don't do much. And again, I think a lot of it has to do with people equate them to tinkerers. And personally, as they stand, they aren't. Not technically. And so playing as one, you have to realize what kind of game you're in. Because some games don't allow for, or don't have a lot of downtime for you to do tinkering, do inventions, and stuff like that. And if that's the only thing you're looking for in a class, a character, that's great. Do that. But personally, if you want to do tinkering, make it like a hobby of a character, and play a different class that you might think has a little bit more substance to it or makes more sense. You could always play a wizard that just does a little tinkering on the side and makes a few things, because wizards can do that too. It's just that as a class, the artificers really only have their infusions and then obviously their subclass. But even their subclasses don't really tinker as much. The closest thing is the alchemist, which you make random potions every day. that can do certain things. And obviously, as you level up, the potions, you know, do different things, or you get more of them, stuff like that. But the other ones, like the gunner one, where you make the cannon, you just have the cannon. You're just a damage dealer at that point, or whatever you make the cannon do. And then you have the battle master, which gets a robot, pretty much, and you just get an extra robot that follow you around, that you can rebuild if it's ever lost. And then you have the armorer, which is you make armor. You basically become Iron Man, and you have armor that you can make it do either a stealth variation or a more like protective variation. And again, all of those are cool, but I don't think by itself the artificer class is very. It doesn't have a lot to it beyond some cool abilities that you use over and over again. When you think of artificers, you think of making things, you think of making inventions. So as a DM, how do you DM for this sort of class? Because artificer, I think when most people play artificer, they want to tinker. You as a DM kind of have to put a little bit more work into setting up an environment to where they can do the inventions, make what they want to make, but at the same time not completely break the game. Because let's be honest, most artificers will ask you right away, point blank, "Can I make a gun?" And you say yes or you say no. At that point, it just depends on working with the player. If you do say yes, working with the player to make an item that's not going to be too overpowered. If they decide to make a firearm, if in your world firearms don't exist at all, they have to make everything. Bullets, they have to repair the weapon if it breaks. I would definitely encourage you to, have a weapon misfire rule like Critical Role did. Some sort of rule to, if you roll a certain number, the gun breaks. Even just general maintenance, have it over time break, even if you're doing everything right. But as a DM, you should consider what kind of game you're running. If you're running a very high action, not a lot of downtime, they're just running around doing objective after objective, quest after quest, and they don't really have time to settle down, I would highly recommend you inform the players that maybe any character concept that would require downtime to be to not be played in that campaign, but artificers especially should not be played in a game where they cannot have downtime to make their things. Especially if you go the route of their infusions and their other like subclass stuff needing to be made as well, because they need a space. They need a little downtime to think of plans and draw up things and make things and find the materials to make things. I do think artificers really need that. They need that slow pace, we'll say, to really get the most out of their character concept. Now, if you have an artificer who just wants the abilities of the artificer and they don't really tinker or anything other than with the stuff they have with their class, like the infusions and stuff, higher paced game may be okay. But from what I've seen, especially in a campaign where the party that they're in is always traveling, a lot of times it gets kind of like you're not playing the character right. It kind of feels like you're not playing the character right if you're not building stuff and being able to sit down and actually plan things and make things. Specifically in a campaign I played in, we had a player who really liked the character he was playing, but he didn't really like the class of Artificer because he wasn't really doing much. Especially because Artificer has that problem of becoming another class. It's not being its own class. for example, with the armorer that I was talking about, I'm playing a rogue in that campaign with an expertise in stealth, and the other player, as an artificer, also had the same modifier in stealth, but with the armor that he had, the stealth armor, he had advantage in all his stealth checks. So immediately you have a situation where the rogue is no longer the most efficient stealth person in the party. And you have kind of roles overlapping, and when you think of artificers, you don't think of artificers sneaking around and it being the sneaky type to do recon and stuff, at least most of the time. Again, when you have that thought of an artificer, you think of a tinkerer. And he was, again, he liked the character, he liked the concept of the character, but just the abilities were not suiting his playstyle. Because he wasn't the type of person to tinker, to do tinkering and stuff, and put the time into tinkering on his own. It ended up he just didn't like the class, and that's so perfectly okay. It's not for everyone. And then he ended up switching to wizard, because you can do a little bit more with that, and you're casting spells and stuff. And I think artificers suffer from the fact that they are technically half casters, so they don't get much in the way other than spells and stuff like that. But specifically armorer and the stealth variation of armor confuses me, because the stealth variation of that armor, I'm just gonna say this, the stealth variation has a lightning cannon on it. And you can shoot the lightning cannon whenever you want, deal extra damage to enemies. I don't understand why that's on a stealth variation of armor. You would think something, a little less conspicuous would be on the stealth variation of armor, but I don't know. But anyway, so first tip, I'll get a first tip for DMing for artificers, fully, is have a campaign where you give players downtime. I recommend this for any campaign in general. If you're running a homebrew one, give your players time for downtime. They will do something, hopefully. And to help them with that, give them things to be attached to. For example, for artificers, give your artificer a workshop. If they want to workshop somewhere in a town or a city or something, give them a little workshop to work with. Give them a place to buy their different materials and everything, and it'll make them want to do it more if they have the ability to, and if they're given the time to, and they'll come up with some unique stuff. I have an artificer in a campaign I'm running right now who they were trying to sneak into this warehouse or sneak into this brewery to get some information, and they decided to the artificer of the group decided to make a little magical wagon, a little magic ran wagon, to help with the ruse of distracting the people to come outside of the brewery so some of the other party could sneak in. That was very cool. And he was given the time, and he made the wagon. He spent the resources and everything, and it turned out good. Now the party has the wagon, and the artificer, who is a kind of tinkerer, feels like they're actually tinkering, that they're actually doing something that their character would do. But you always got to give them time, because, again, not a lot of players will do downtime activities if they think they are being rushed or there's something very important to do. Which obviously, in campaigns where you're trying to stop the world from ending, that can be a little bit more difficult. But I always think you can put in some downtime. The characters have to rest at some point. Maybe sometime a lead goes short, and they don't exactly know where to go from at a certain point. They get a little downtime. But artificers definitely need that downtime. My second tip is to be very open with the player about what you allow and what you don't allow as far as when they're making things. Because specifically artificers, if they're playing artificer, will try to get some pretty wild stuff past you. Again, you hear a lot people trying to make guns. Sometimes it don't work too well. So again, let's use that example. Someone's trying to make a gun. You gotta think about, does gunpowder exist? If not, is there an alternative? And you should really have the player explain how they're doing it. Because if the player explains how they're doing it, you can say that exists, that doesn't exist, or there's a possibility of it existing. So if it does exist, let's say gunpowder. It does exist. Okay. How do they acquire the gunpowder? Do they make it? Do they buy it? Can they do a little bit of both? That's the sort of thing. And once you do that, it just adds another step to when they finally make the thing, they feel like they've done it. They've that's the point of their class. Even though maybe it's not, artificers are just little people that make little magical things. But a lot of people equate them to tinkerers, and this kind of helps that. How do they get the wood or the metal they use in the construction? How long does it take for them to draw out plans? How long does it take for them to construct it? Do they have to smith the metal themselves? Do they have the right tool proficiencies for all the tools they're going to need? Obviously, they need tinkerer's tools, but maybe they need woodworking tools to shape the wood. Maybe they need smith's tools to shape the iron or the metal that they use for it. That kind of thing, including those tools as well, because tool proficiencies don't get used very much, specifically unless you're planning on using them. So involving their tool proficiencies into the things they do, and as well skill checks, obviously, to make things. One I see very often is sleight of hand. If you're doing very particularly like intricate work, that also, I've seen that a lot, and that's the one I usually go to. Sleight of hand. Intelligence checks to like draw out plans. It can all be stuff used to really give them a preferable experience. And I think you do those two things, give them downtime, and make their skills matter. And also, again, be very open with what you're allowing them to make and what you're not allowing them to make, because technically, even using infusions, if you use an infusion, you can make a railgun, I think. It's either a railgun. Actually, I'm going to look it up right here. They can make some sort of very powerful firearm using infusions. So even then, you have to be like, hey, this is what I allow, this is what I don't. Again, very DM heavy, but it's not complicated per se. Just sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It's not like fighters, where it's like most of the time a fighter is going to be okay with fighting things, being athletic, stuff like that. A wizard or a sorcerer, magic is their thing, learning about magic, doing magic. Druids and stuff, nature is their thing. Artificers kind of fall in that point where they can do kind of a couple different things. They don't have their own niche per se. And when they do have their niche, it's not as simple as, make a nature check. You learn a little bit about nature, if you're a druid, or do an arcana check, learn a little bit about magic, as a wizard or a sorcerer or something. Even with like clerics and stuff, clerics and paladins and stuff, they have their oaths and their deities. And even that, again, it's not as simple as, your deity speaks to you, or make a religion check or something like that. Artificers, most of the time, again, tinkering, making things, so you have to do a little bit more effort on your part to very easily get them kind of sorted and keep them entertained. That's the whole point of D&D. Have fun, be entertained. You don't want to feel like your class doesn't matter, or that you'd have fun with another class. Or sometimes you do. Sometimes you just have to learn if you like a class or not. Artificers, however, are great multi-class options. Maybe if you think a player is not having fun with artificer, or maybe they want to do a little bit of tinkering and stuff. You don't have to be an artificer to tinker in D&D. If you have the right proficiencies and skills, you can tinker as any class, as a little hobby. But if you think someone like would enjoy maybe having infusions or the more mechanical benefits of artificer, they are great multi-class options. Simply because if you're not really planning on using the spells, you can multi-class again for the infusions, which don't require any skills or anything like that. I know there are quite a few classes that benefit from the artificer abilities, but yeah, that's just simply, artificers are almost always going to be tinkerers, and you have to kind of set up your campaign or set up your situations to afford them that time and effort into making things, and make quests and stuff that maybe need an artificer to make an invention. Let's say you're, again, trying to infiltrate a place. Maybe the place has pretty high walls, and you need a way to get over them. The artificer can try to make a grappling hook or something, like a grappling hook that can shoot over, that maybe, would be easier than tossing up a hook and trying to climb up a rope, or if specifically making situations where there's NPCs or something that have something that's broken, and the artificer can, their eyes can widen and they can get right to work fixing it for them, because they like fixing things. They like putting things back together that are broken. Throw a couple things that keep them busy. You gotta keep them busy. That's the thing, and that goes for any D&D player, but specifically for artificers, I feel like a lot of the times they need to be busy. And people who play them like to be busy, like to be doing things, like to draw up plans and schemes and all that stuff. They do like that sort of thing. It's a very unique class. But again, I have my tripes with it. The spells, they're just a nerfed wizard spell list. It's just whatever, because technically, artificers, when casting magic, they don't cast magic. They're gadgets. But there's no rules to say you have to make these gadgets. It's just you pick the spell like normal, and then you just flavor it as a gadget. And again, can be a little bit fun when you're first doing it, but after a while, it's just, you're just casting the spell. There's nothing mechanically different about the spell than if a spellcaster casted it. So that's, that all that combined, the lack of uniqueness other than flavor. There's no mechanical uniqueness about some of the things. Again, infusions are just improving armor and weapons. Your spells are just a flavor texted to be gadgets. They're not, really gadgets. You still use spell slots like other spellcasters. Well, that can make the artificer feel kind of boring if you're not actively doing more than just what you have on your sheet. And again, as a DM, just throw in situations that apply to them more often. And make sure to keep communicating with your player. If someone's playing an artificer, ask them if they're coming up with ideas, because even if they have an idea and it's not useful, still give them the option to make it, because they're tinkers. They just make stuff for the fun of it, and they will they'll do the rest. You can have them make stuff even when they don't need it to sell, sell to people. Make little trinkets and toys, stuff like that. But yeah, that's pretty much all I got to say on artificers, but there's another thing that'll be explained in a separate video that I'm going to do, a little part 2 to artificers, is going over my idea for a homebrew subclass for the Artificer. And all I'm going to say is it'll involve making some stuff. Kind of keeping that whole concept of making things and trying to improve those things as an actual mechanic. It's not like some other classes where it's just, oh, your stuff improves as you level up. It's you have to make the effort, use resources, and make choices. But you'll have a lot more choices with the stuff you do make. And maybe it's just a little bit out of this world. But thank you all for listening. A little bit of a short one. But there's not too much to say about this topic. It's not particularly a problem. It's just stuff I've noticed within my personal play that sometimes comes up. But if you enjoyed, do all the stuff that makes the YouTube algorithm happy. Leave a like, leave some comments, and subscribe if you feel like it. And I'll see you next time in the Corner Seat Tavern.